We turn back to the legislative session now with a look at some of the bills up for consideration this year. Connor Boyack is the president of the Libertas Institute. He's here to dig into some of the top legislative priorities for his organization. Connor, welcome back to the show. It's great to have you on.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Let's start with medical cannabis. This has been something you guys have been working on for years now. Of course, we all know we passed the new law, but now some modifications. Let's get into those. It's a big bill, but let's get into some of the bigger things. First off, the getting rid of the blister pack requirement.
So what's a blister pack? I mean, it's a weird word, but the way we negotiated Prop 2 at the end when a lot of opposition was trying to kill it, one of the points of contention was the raw cannabis flower. Can patients have access to it? It's much cheaper, and a lot of people, especially with the THC vaping issue, that was actually another vitamin E acetate, something in the cannabis. So a lot of patients just want the raw flower, keep it clean, keep it natural. But some of the opposition didn't want that. So we came up with this idea of putting in these blister packs, kind of like your allergy medication or sometimes of chewing gum. But that's expensive, it's awkward, no other state does it, and so one of the big changes in this year's bill is we're completely going away from that and moving more towards the industry standard of just jars, containers, and stuff like that.
Talk about some of the problems you faced with that, because I know there was some confusion about not only what it meant and how much could be in it, that sort of thing. What type of problems have you seen with the blister pack requirement specifically?
Well, one of the biggest problems we're going to face is the actual cost of medicine, because the black market is always there. It's always been there. And if the cost of medical cannabis is too much higher, patients are just going to keep using it illegally. They're not going to benefit from the legal protections. They're going to put themselves, their jobs, their children at risk. And so if the costs are really high, it becomes a barrier. And blister packs was one of the things that added to that cost, because it was going to be an entirely new and novel thing that Utah had to figure out and require. And so we just wanted to try and do away with the cost, in this case with the blister pack requirement, and trying to find ways to reduce that price so that patients feel more incentives to come into the program.
Another issue you're looking at is expungement for patients.
Yeah.
Talk about what you're trying to accomplish with that part of the bill.
So expungements are the ability to basically wipe from your criminal record a past offense that you've committed. Now that the state, the legislature, the voters have said yes to medical cannabis, we can look back and say, well, yes, patients before Prop 2 violated the law. They knew what they were doing. There was an amount of risk there, but they're patients. They had cancer. They had epilepsy. Can we turn backward before Prop 2 with a little bit of compassion and say, if you can establish that you had those conditions and your doctor was supportive, let's get that off your criminal record since we've made that decision going forward.
What kind of pushback are you facing there, though? Is there a concern that, hey, look, back then this was the law, so why should we go back and expunge those records?
It's a fair point, but not really. I mean, first of all, these are early discussions, right? We've only had 1 week of the legislative session already, so we have a lot more conversations to have.
Sure.
But in terms of the stakeholders that we've been meeting around the table on these issues, there's a recognition that there's a new perspective on cannabis that didn't exist even just a year ago, let alone many years ago. And so I don't know how far back the expungement is going to be. I don't think we're going 20 years back.
Sure.
But I think there is an opportunity to try and do right by some of those patients that have been waiting for years.
There was an issue with this right after Prop 2 was approved, though, as well. Patients were still being pulled over and charged with crimes. Has that panned out? Are we starting to see that level out? Or is there a need for expungement in some of those cases as well?
Yes, and it's improved. We have had some struggles, and it's taken law enforcement and prosecutors and judges a little bit of time to warm up to the law, to read what the law. It's very frustrating to say, yay, we changed the law, and then the government continues to not enforce the law and not abide by the law. So it's been a bit of a learning curve for everyone. We've tried to be patient with all of the law enforcement. We're getting a lot better. But yes, I think expungement would include those people as well.
Okay, let's move on to another issue. When I first saw this that you guys were working on, I thought that's kind of different to see you guys work on something like this, but it makes sense in the sense of more choice for parents, and this is for special needs students and their parents. You guys would like to have different options for them to be able to take advantage of if they so choose.
So I really liked in the governor's State of the State address this week, he quoted Utah's Teacher of the Year saying that we need innovation in the education system so that the needs of every individual child is met. We completely agree with that. The problem with the current public education system is there's not a lot of flexibility, especially for those with special needs. You can get an individualized education program set up for your child, but even then there's often not the right resources or not enough. This would be a scholarship where, in lieu of going to the public school and getting the services that they give you there, your special needs child could go to a private school, could get tutors, therapists, basically get pulled out of public school, and a lot of those dollars that are being spent on that child in public school would be unlocked and follow the child so that the parent could help provide for their kid the specific individualized services that they particularly need to help them improve and get over whatever challenges they have. Maybe they go back into public education after working those things through, but this is really a design to try and meet the individual needs of those kids with special needs.
And the idea there is that public school doesn't work for all special needs students.
Yeah, and I think it's a fair argument. It's not meant to criticize the system, but you can't really have this big system that has the ability to adapt to all these individual needs. Parents know their children best. This isn't a very broad system. It's very narrow, but it's meant to help those who have the most needs among us.
All right. You just mentioned innovation in education. You guys are looking at innovation in business as well, cutting back regulation. What would you like to see done there?
So we're a free market organization to our core. That's kind of our bread and butter. And every single year in Utah, we've had a free market fight. Think of Tesla, the food trucks, Airbnb, Uber and Lyft. Every year, these new innovative companies come out, and then the government shuts them down and comes after them. Last year, it was Turo. Imagine people flying into Salt Lake City, going to the curbside, and then an officer is standing there with a ticket because you were trying to share a car with this guy that, as it turns out, oh, Salt Lake City criminalized. Rather than reacting every year to these fights and then trying to reactively fix the law, what we're looking at this year is an opportunity for certain industries to be able to flip that narrative. Rather than being reactive, let's be proactive, where if a company comes into a problem, their business model doesn't quite fit the regulations, their service, their product, we can hit the pause button and say, rather than continue to criminalize that, as long as it's safe, as long as no one's being harmed or no one's at jeopardy, let's put a pause button on that enforcement and give a couple years to let the law catch up.
We have about a minute left. Let's get to eminent domain, another thing you guys are working on. You want to limit the government's ability to take personal property.
Yeah, fairly simple. The balance is a bit out of whack, and the government right now can take a lot of people's property, and you really don't have legs in court to challenge the government. What we're looking to do is set up a rubric so that a property owner can get into court, and the judge would have to check the boxes to make sure that the city is allowed to take the property. So really, we're just trying to let people who want to fight and challenge an eminent domain taking, they have the ability to do so, whereas right now they really don't.
All right, those issues and many more you guys are keeping your eye on. We appreciate your time here, and we'll be following those as they go along in the session.
Thanks, Glenn.